In all areas of research, there's two types of studies. One type of study are these field studies in which you basically give questionnaires. So in the world of video games, you'd probably give a questionnaire to some kids and ask them, do you play violent video games, yes or no? And then you'd assess some sort of outcome, like violent behavior. And they were able to find links, and they do find links between children who play violent video games and who are aggressive. Of course, the problem with that type of research is you can't draw a causal relationship, because it could be that kids who are naturally violent are more attracted to violent video games to start off with, so you don't really know what comes first. Then we have lab studies where we can draw cause and effect, and that's where we manipulate. So we have some people play a violent video game for a set period of time, and another set play a non-violent video game for a set period of time, and then we assess them on some type of outcome. So rather it be some type of response on a questionnaire, or some type of game essentially set up to assess aggression. That type of situation, we can draw cause and effects. Now, both studies have strengths and weaknesses. So the field studies, the strength is it's in the real world. The weakness is we can't draw cause and effect. The lab study is, the strength is we can draw cause and effect, but it's not in the real world. It's in this very artificial setting. And so what you really have to do is take both types of studies and put them together and think of them simultaneously. In games, we do see that, but we have to be very careful about this. And this is, I think, usually on both sides of the argument on the video games, that both sides get it wrong. That one side wants to note that video games have this gigantic cause and effect relationship, and the other side wants to argue that there's absolutely no relationship at all. But what we find in research is it's not this simple. It's not like a light switch that video games do or do not. It's much more like a dimmer switch. And we can look across all studies that have been done, and there's been several meta-analyses done. Probably the most prominent are Anderson's, Sherry's, and Ferguson's. And they all point to about the same size of an effect. And how we assess effects is using a Pearson correlation, which essentially ranges, in this case, it would range from basically 0 to 1. A 1 would mean, wow, that's gigantic, that's the only thing causing it. A 0 would mean no effect at all. And what we find with video games is the effect size is about 0.17. So it's very small. It is positive. It's going in the positive direction, so there is an effect. But it's not as if it's a child's picking up a game and instantly they're becoming, psychotic. It's a very small effect. It's a consistent effect, but small. And more recent research actually suggests, from our lab and other labs, is that this effect is really only consistent in certain types of individuals, specifically individuals with predispositions before they ever played the video game. So certain psychological profile of, say, an adult or a child might make the violent video games have a greater effect on them. It's a small proportion of our population, so this isn't everybody, but it's just these certain types of individuals. So in some ways, the answer to the question if violent video games, do they have an effect, it's not so simple as yes or no. It's very complex, and that yes, they have an effect. The effect is generally pretty small, and only for a very small subset of individuals with certain predispositions, does this effect tend to become magnified. That have done this research, we find that individuals who, before they play the video game, are extremely angry. So just some individuals are just characteristically more angry. Also individuals who are somewhat neurotic, so they're very moody and unconscientious, are the ones that are most affected by violent video games. So it'd be kind of your classic case of a person who's angry, they don't have good impulse control, and they're very moody. That they're a danger before they play video games, certainly, but the video games kind of intensifies this characteristic. Again, I want to be careful, though. Even when I talk about this intensifying of characteristics, it's not leaping up. The correlation numbers don't leap up to 1 or anything. They just go up slightly, maybe closer to like 0.25, whereas for everyone else, it's a little bit lower. So even these people who are adversely affected by it, it's not like it's taking control of their lives. It's just that they tend to be more affected. One way to think about this idea of some people being differently affected by it is kind of like, is very similar to allergies. So, we could open up a bag of peanuts and a lot of us would be perfectly fine with the peanuts. But if somebody has a predisposition to be allergic to peanuts, they're going to be affected by that. Same thing with violent video games. For the most part, most people can play violent video games and the long-term effects are not these gigantic effects. But for a few individuals, it certainly might, if you will, kind of hype them up and make them more excitable and potentially more aggressive. The other thing I forgot to say this earlier, so to just go back, most of our outcomes when we assess aggression are not aggression like punching people, kicking people, getting arrested. There are a few studies that have done that correlationally. But most of our assessments of aggression are simply elevations of general tendencies of aggression, or perhaps in an artificial setting, you know, thinking you're hurting a person with a little bit more noise blast than not. So our outcome measures that we use to assess aggression are really also proxy measures to assess real life aggression. And so even when I talk about our effect sizes being about 0.17, there's a good chance that the real effect size as far as the real aggression might even be lower than 0.17, since we're kind of using these proxy measures. So certainly everyone who scores high on a measurement of aggression is not going to go out and, you know, punch somebody. You know, they're more likely than those who score low, but they're not all going to do. So that 0.17 is probably, might even be a little bit overinflated for the general person. Again, it's not going down to zero though. I mean, so it is important to remember that they do have some effect, but it's just that this effect is small and it affects different people differently.
Thank you.